I didn't grow up with fairy tales or bedtime stories. I grew up with unpaid utility bills, late rent notices taped to our apartment door, and the creaking sound of my parents whispering at night about what to cut next. The South Side of Chicago wasn't some tragedy, it was just our normal. Cracked sidewalks, busted radiators, and corner stores that locked up the milk after dark. But we survived. We always survived. My parents were the definition of exhausted. Mom was a nurse, tired feet, tired smile. Dad drove trucks, long haul, sometimes gone for days, sometimes home, but too tired to talk. But they worked. God, did they work. And me, I was the oldest, the built-in babysitter, tutor, and emotional sponge. But mostly, I was the responsible one, which was just code for, you'll forgive us when we favor your brother again, right? Adam, my little brother, was the golden child. Always was. If Adam spilled juice on the carpet, I got scolded for not watching him. If Adam forgot his homework, I was asked, didn't you remind him? And when Adam sailed a class, it somehow became a reflection of my failure as a sister. I remember once I brought home a perfect report card, straight A's. Mom smiled, said, "Good job, sweetie." Adam brought home a C in science the same day. And what did she say? "Why didn't you help him more? You're so good at school." That was the rhythm. My accomplishments were expected. His mediocrity was excused. I learned early that love in our house came with strings, and mine were always tangled. I wasn't abused, but I was unseen. And in some ways, that's just as heavy. I didn't dream big. I just dreamed of a quiet place where no one blamed me for things I didn't do. A door that closed, a light that was mine. Just one room where I didn't have to shrink. I don't remember my early 20s and vacations, parties, or new outfits. I remember them in cup noodles, plastic takeout forks, and walking home at midnight with aching feet and $5 left to my name. That was my normal. While people my age were backpacking through Europe or posting rooftop brunches on Instagram, I was stocking shelves at 5 a.m., serving tables at 6 p.m., and cleaning offices on weekends. 3 jobs, 1 dream. My schedule was color-coded chaos. Wake, work, school, work, sleep, repeat. Sometimes the only thing I had for dinner was instant ramen and a silent prayer that my bus wouldn't break down. But here's the thing. I didn't complain. Not because it wasn't hard, but because I knew exactly what I was fighting for. Freedom, stability, a home no one could take from me. I watched friends sign leases with their parents' help, throw just because parties, and travel across the country for music festivals. I skipped every invitation. I missed every birthday. I said no so often it started to feel like my default setting, but every no was building my yes. I kept a jar in my closet, a glass jar with duct tape over the label that read in all caps, "My future." Every time I got paid, I put something in, even if it was just a few bucks and loose change. That jar reminded me I was building something, not just surviving, but climbing inch by inch toward a life I wouldn't have to escape from. I remember the exact day. It wasn't a holiday. No balloons. No champagne. Just a Tuesday. The sun was barely up. I was sitting at my tiny kitchen table, same spot where I had studied for finals, cried over late notices, and eaten more instant noodles than I cared to admit. I opened my laptop, logged into my bank account, and there it was, the final mortgage payment. The number looked so ordinary on the screen, just a few digits and a green button that said submit. But to me, that number was blood, sweat, and years of being invisible. I hovered over it for a moment. My hand was shaking. Then I clicked it. Paid in full. I didn't scream. I didn't jump. I just sat there, still, breathing. And then I cried. Not the kind of tears you cry when you're broken, but the kind that come when you've carried something heavy for too long and you finally get to put it down. That condo wasn't big. It had creaky floors, old plumbing, and a neighbor who played drums at 10 p.m., but it was mine. Mine. Not co-signed, not rented. Not borrowed. Mine. It was the first thing in my life I didn't have to share, explain, or apologize for. I stood up, walked over to the front door, and touched it like it was sacred. I whispered, "You're safe now." I didn't know I was talking to myself. The first time Naomi stepped into my condo, she didn't even make it past the entryway before wrinkling her nose. "Oh," she said, glancing around like the walls were offending her. "It's cute." I smiled politely. Because that's what I'd been taught to do when someone insults you and calls it a compliment. Naomi was the kind of woman who never just walked into a room. She arrived. Designer heels, flawless curls, expensive perfume that could choke a cat. She married my little brother Adam 5 years ago, and ever since, she wore the title Mrs. Adams like a tiara. And when she walked into my place that day, uninvited of course, she didn't ask if she could come in. She just breezed through like she owned the air. "I could never live somewhere like this," she said, running her fingers across my windowsill like she was checking for dust. "It's so modest." I knew what that meant. Modest to Naomi was a synonym for beneath her. She grew up in the suburbs, comfortable, not rich, but definitely pampered. Her parents bought her first car, her first apartment's furniture, and rumor had it even helped with their wedding down payment. She'd never lived paycheck to paycheck, never skipped meals, never sat in the dark waiting for the lights to come back on. So, of course, she couldn't understand how someone like me could be proud of something like this condo. I watched her walk through my living room like she was appraising it for a yard sale. "It's very lived in," she said, as if it were a flaw. I could have kicked her out, but I didn't, because in that moment, I didn't think I was being invaded. I thought I was just being judged. I had no idea she'd come back later, not with judgment, but with plans. Naomi didn't just dislike my condo. She wanted it. I should have known something was off the moment Naomi showed up alone. She never came to see me by herself. In fact, she usually avoided me unless it was a holiday or she needed something. But that afternoon, she waltzed in uninvited, holding a reusable shopping bag, like she was just swinging by for a casual chat. I offered her coffee. She declined. Instead, she walked around the condo, slowly inspecting it like it was a piece of property at an open house. And then, without even sitting down, she turned to me with that signature Naomi smile, the kind that never quite reaches her eyes. "So," she said casually, "we've made a decision." My stomach dropped. Adam and I talked, and yeah, this condo makes the most sense for our family. I stared at her. "I'm sorry, what now?" She folded her arms like she was about to deliver a TED Talk on entitled logic. "You've lived here for years," she said, nodding like she was doing me a favor. "And now that it's paid off, it should be considered a family asset." I blinked. Did she just say family asset? She did. "It's just you here," she continued. "Adam and I have a child. We need more space. You don't." I said nothing. My mind was still trying to process the words spilling from her mouth like reality was folding in on itself. "You should start looking for somewhere else," she added, as if she were helping me out. "We're planning to move in by the end of next month." I was frozen, not angry, not hurt, just stunned. It wasn't just what she said. It was how she said it, like it was a done deal, like I didn't even have a say. Naomi didn't come that day to ask. She came to inform. And in her mind, that condo, the one I bled for, the one I sacrificed years of my life for, now belonged to them. Naomi didn't miss a beat. "I mean, let's be honest," she said, pacing my living room like a smug real estate agent. "You're single. You have no kids. You don't need all this space." There it was, the entitlement dressed up as logic. I stood completely still, one hand on the back of my kitchen chair. "You think you can just take my home because I don't have a child?" "It's not about taking," she said with a roll of her eyes. "It's about what's fair." And there it was, that word, fair. The favorite weapon of people who only believe in fairness when they're the ones benefiting from it. We're family, she added. Families help each other, and you're not even using your second bedroom. My pulse was rising, but my expression stayed calm. So let me get this straight, I said slowly. Because I worked my ass off and bought this condo, and because I don't have a husband or a kid, I should just give it to you? Naomi tilted her head. Well, yeah, and that's when it happened. I laughed. Not a polite chuckle, not a fake little smile. I laughed, full-on, out-loud, can't-breathe kind of laugh. Naomi stared at me, clearly offended. What's so funny? She snapped. You, I said, wiping a tear from the corner of my eye. You actually think this is fair? You actually believe that because you have a child and I don't, that somehow gives you the right to take my home? She crossed her arms. I'm not taking anything. I'm just saying it makes more sense. We have a family. We need it more than you do. My smile vanished. No, I said quietly. What makes sense is that you can't afford your life and now you want mine. And for the first time, Naomi didn't have a response. Adam was the golden child. Always was. I don't say that with bitterness. I say it like a fact, like saying the sky is blue or fire is hot. From the day he was born, everything he did was worthy of applause. He walked late. He's just careful. He threw tantrums. Boys will be boys. He failed a math quiz. He's more of a creative type. But when I stumbled, the story was different. If I cried, why are you so emotional? If I asked for help, you're the big sister. Figure it out. And when Adam messed up, it always somehow came back to me. I still remember the day he got caught shoplifting a candy bar from the gas station. Mom didn't even look at him. She turned to me and said, "Why weren't you watching your brother?" I was 12. 12. That moment stuck with me more than any punishment. Not because of the scolding, but because of how normal it was to blame me for his failures. It taught me something dangerous, that love in our house wasn't given equally. It was assigned. And I was the responsible one, the one who didn't get into trouble, the one they trusted to do the right thing, which really meant stay quiet, carry the weight, and don't make waves. And for a long time, I did, because I thought that if I just worked hard enough, stayed patient long enough, eventually I'd earn the same kind of love Adam got automatically. But that day in my condo, when Naomi said, "We need it more," I realized something I should have known a long time ago. They were never going to see me as equal, and I was done pretending I didn't notice. The texts started the next morning. The first one came at 6:43 a.m. Mom, I heard about what happened yesterday. Naomi told me. I'm disappointed in you. That was how it always started, with disappointment. Never curiosity, never asking for my side, just straight to guilt. I didn't reply. At 7:15, Adam is your brother. He has a family, a baby, and you're living in a 2-bedroom by yourself? Doesn't that seem unfair? I stared at the screen. Unfair? There's that word again. At 8:02, she doubled down. You don't even use the second bedroom. What are you saving it for? Boxes? And then the gut punch. You're alone. They're not. That one sat heavy, not because it wasn't true, but because it was thrown like an insult, like my solitude was a failure, like being single was something to be ashamed of. And the worst part, I could hear her voice saying it, not with anger, not even with spite, with pity, and that somehow hurt the most. I typed, I deleted, I typed again. Then I finally sent one message back. It's my home. I earned it. That's the only thing that matters. She didn't reply after that, but I knew what she'd do next. She wouldn't stop. She'd gather the troops, and the campaign of guilt was just getting started. The guilt campaign came fast and loud. By noon, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. First Mom, then Dad, then came my aunt, my uncle. cousins I hadn't heard from in years. One by one, they each called or texted, not to check on me, not to ask what actually happened, but to say some version of the same thing. He has a child. They're struggling. You don't need all that space. The words were different, but the message was the same. My home was no longer seen as mine. It had become a shared resource, a community asset, a potluck dish I was expected to hand over for the greater good. No one asked how I got it. No one acknowledged the sleepless nights, the skipped meals, the years of saying no to myself so I could say yes to stability. To them, this wasn't about sacrifice. It was about convenience, and I was the convenient one. "Why are you being so cold?" my mom said on her fourth call. "You've always been the strong one, the understanding one." That's when it clicked. My strength had become their excuse. They didn't support me because I didn't need support. They didn't protect me because I could handle not being protected. My quiet resilience wasn't admired. It was used. And suddenly, I didn't feel guilty anymore. I felt done. I knew it wasn't really a dinner invitation. It was a setup. When Mom called and said, "We're having a family dinner this weekend, you should come," I could hear the rehearsed sweetness in her voice, the kind of fake warmth people use when they're about to hand you a shovel and ask you to dig your own grave. But I went anyway. Not because I thought they deserved a conversation, but because I deserved to say no to their faces. The moment I stepped into my parents' house, I felt it. The air was too still, the smiles too stiff, the dining table too perfectly set. They'd been waiting for me. Naomi was already seated, arms crossed, wearing that smug grin like she'd already won the war. Adam sat beside her, looking not guilty, but uncomfortable, like he wanted to disappear into the floor. My mom greeted me with exaggerated warmth. My dad gave me a nod, like he was at a funeral. No one touched the food. The roast chicken sat steaming in the center of the table. The wine was poured. The silverware glinted. But no one lifted a fork. Because this wasn't dinner. This was an intervention. A family ambush dressed up in linen napkins and fake concern. And I was the target. But what they didn't know, what Naomi didn't see through that smug little smirk, was that I didn't come to be talked down to. I came ready to flip the table. "Honey," Mom began, reaching across the table to touch my hand. Her voice was soft, almost trembling. She looked like she was about to deliver bad news from a doctor. But this wasn't about illness. It was about inheritance they hadn't earned. "We've all been thinking about this," she said, giving my fingers a gentle squeeze. "We, not you, not me, we. And we just think it's time to do what's best for the family." I said nothing. She pressed on. "We love you, sweetheart. We do. But it's a bit selfish, don't you think? Keeping all that space for yourself?" There it is, the word that had been whispered in every call and text. Selfish. For having a home. For keeping what I earned. For not sacrificing myself again. Naomi nodded along like this was a perfectly reasonable discussion. "You're not even using the second bedroom," Mom added. "You don't need that much space." "And what happens if someday you do have someone?" I raised an eyebrow. "Someone? You know, a partner, a child. Maybe it'll come when you least expect it. But right now, it just sits empty." I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. "So let me get this straight. You want me to give up my home because I might fall in love someday?" Dad finally spoke. His tone was calm even. "We're not asking you to give it up. Just let them stay there. Temporarily. It's not like you'll be on the street." "And where exactly would I go?" I asked. "You could get a nice apartment," Mom said cheerfully, like she was planning a vacation. "Something smaller, something that fits your lifestyle." Lifestyle. Translation, alone. The guilt wasn't subtle. It was carefully constructed, pre-scripted. They had rehearsed this, and they really thought I would fold. The air in the room had turned syrupy thick with guilt sugar-coated with concern. I looked around the table. My parents were nodding at each other. Naomi was practically glowing. They thought I was about to break, that all their emotional choreography had worked, but they had no idea I'd brought my own script. I turned to Adam, who hadn't said a word all evening. His hands were folded in his lap, his eyes locked on the untouched wine glass in front of him. "You already tried to buy a house last year, didn't you?" The entire table froze. Adam looked up, slowly. "What?" I leaned forward, voice calm and even. "You and Naomi applied for a mortgage, you got denied." Naomi's smile shattered. "That's none of your business," she snapped. I didn't look at her. I looked at Adam. "You got denied because of bad credit and mountains of debt." My mom gasped. "That's not true." "It's true," I said flatly. "A friend of mine works in real estate. She pulled your file." Silence. "You didn't come after my home because you needed it," I said, scanning each of their faces. "You came after it because you couldn't afford your own." Dad finally spoke, his voice low, like someone trying to control the damage. "That still doesn't mean—" "No," I interrupted. "That means everything." Naomi's cheeks were burning now. She looked ready to leap across the table. "You had no right digging into our finances." "And you had no right trying to take my home," I shot back. My mom turned to Adam, eyes wide, voice shaking. "Is this true?" Adam opened his mouth, closed it, looked down. That told me everything I needed to know. And just like that, the guilt shifted. I didn't have to explain myself anymore. Because now they had to explain themselves. The room didn't explode, it imploded. Silence so loud it rang in my ears. My mom sat frozen, hand still hovering near her wine glass, her face slack with shock. "Adam," she whispered. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even anger. It was disbelief. Naomi looked away, jaw tight, eyes darting toward the front door like she wanted to vanish. My dad was the first to move. He rubbed his forehead slowly, like he was calculating how deep this hole really was. "You lied to us," my mom finally asked. Adam didn't answer. "You let us think she was being selfish, while all this time you were hiding your debt." Adam cleared his throat. "It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple," I said, voice steady. "You tried to guilt me out of my home. You weaponized the one thing I earned in my entire life and made me feel like I owed it to you." My mom's lip trembled. The look she gave Adam wasn't fury. It was something deeper. It was disappointment. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one on trial. He was. And for a split second, he looked 12 years old again, caught red-handed, with no one left to hide behind. The night after that dinner, I slept like a rock, and yet I woke up tired. The kind of tired that settles in your bones when your brain's been running marathons all night, even in dreams. Something wasn't right. The conversation had ended, but the energy hadn't shifted. My phone was quiet, no calls, no apologies, just silence. A heavy kind. I cleaned my condo twice that week, rearranged the couch, washed the curtains, anything to calm the itch I couldn't name. But every time I passed the front door, something inside me whispered, "Check the lock again." So I did. Then I checked the balcony door, the windows. The cameras I'd installed last year after a weird package incident. It felt like overkill, but still, I couldn't shake it. Naomi hadn't screamed at me that night. She hadn't even fought. That wasn't like her. And the last time someone stayed quiet like that in my life, something ugly followed. I didn't know it yet, but the storm wasn't over. It hadn't even begun. The sound that woke me wasn't loud. It was soft. A click. Then another, like someone testing the door. My heart froze before my body did. I grabbed my phone, opened the security app. Front camera. It was pitch black at first, then motion. A shadow moved across the screen. Then a face, Naomi, dressed in black hoodie pulled up, left hand holding her phone for light, right hand holding a screwdriver. Not knocking, not yelling, not pleading, prying. She was trying to break into my home at 2:37 in the morning. I watched her jiggle the lock like she'd done this before. Calm, mechanical, focused. Like this wasn't a meltdown. This was a mission. She was going to take my home whether I agreed or not. I hit record, then I called the cops. There's a woman trying to break into my condo. I have her on live camera feed. She's armed with a tool and trying the lock. The dispatcher stayed on the line. Naomi was still working the door when red and blue lights painted the hallway. Her head jerked up, she bolted, but she didn't get far. She ran right into the cops. Hands up, face pale. I stood in my hallway, frozen in my robe as they cuffed her, still holding the screwdriver. 2:37 a.m. That's when the line was crossed. That's when Naomi stopped being family and became a criminal. Hands where we can see them. The hallway exploded with noise. Red and blue lights bounced off every surface, spinning like a siren in a nightmare. Naomi froze mid-motion, screwdriver still in her hand. She turned around slowly, like time itself had slowed for her. Her hoodie slipped down just enough for the officers to see her face and for me to see hers. Panic, not the kind that screams, the kind that chokes. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. One officer advanced. On your knees now. Naomi hesitated, then dropped the tool. The sound of metal hitting tile was louder than it should have been. Then she kneeled, hands shaking but raised. A second later, her wrists were behind her back, locked in cuffs. Her eyes darted toward the security camera. She knew it was over. One officer spoke into his radio. Female suspect in custody. Attempted burglary, confirmed identity, prior record. Prior? She already had a record. That part hit harder than I expected. She wasn't just entitled, she was dangerous. And this time, she just violated her parole. No more pleading, no more gaslighting. No more dinner table guilt trips. Just a woman in handcuffs and the weight of her own choices crashing down. The courtroom smelled like old wood and bad decisions. Naomi sat at the defendant's table, no makeup, no designer bag, no attitude, just an orange jumpsuit and eyes that refused to look up. I was in the second row, not to gloat, but because I needed to see it. I needed to see the system work. The judge was calm but cold. Miss Naomi Walker, this is not your first offense. Silence. You were already on probation for fraud, and now attempted unlawful entry at night with tools. He flipped through papers like slicing through illusions. This was not a misunderstanding. It was a violation. Naomi's lawyer tried. Your Honor, she was under emotional distress. The judge cut him off. She had a screwdriver in her hand. This wasn't emotion. This was intent. Naomi finally looked up, her lip trembling. But no tears. Just silence. Cold, hard silence. I hereby sentence you to 90 days in county jail. Bang. The gavel sounded like thunder. I exhaled for the first time in weeks, not because I was happy, but because finally someone other than me had said, enough. Adam always used to walk like he had someone to catch him if he ever stumbled, but after Naomi was sentenced, he stopped walking like that. First, he lost his job. His boss had concerns about the news coverage. Next came the eviction notice. 3 months behind on rent. No one was willing to co-sign anymore, and the credit cards maxed out. His texts became erratic, long, rambling paragraphs at 2 a.m. You don't understand what it's like. This wasn't supposed to happen. You should have just let us stay for a few months. As if I was the one who broke into my own home. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't feel anything, but because I felt too much. The golden boy of the family was crumbling, and the ones who always cleaned up his messes were finally gone, and he didn't know how to sweep on his own. It wasn't revenge, it was punctuation, a clean, sharp period at the end of a long, bloody sentence. I waited until Naomi was released, until Adam had packed what little they had into the back seat of a borrowed sedan, until the landlord changed the locks behind them. Then I took the photo. My condo, gleaming, peaceful, bathed in the kind of light you don't notice until the shadows are gone. I didn't write a long message, no curses, no closure speech, just one sentence. Hope you enjoy your new place. Send. No response, but I imagined them reading it in silence, sitting in a motel room that smelled like old carpet and ash. I imagined Naomi's lips tightening, Adam looking away, and me, I turned off my phone and made dinner in peace. Blocking someone isn't an act of hate. It's an act of self-respect. I didn't do it in a fury. No shaking hands, no dramatic sighs. Just one by one. Mom, Adam, Naomi, Aunt Teresa, who always said I should be more forgiving. Even Grandma, who meant well but never defended me once. Block, 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 block. The weight didn't drop all at once. It lifted like a fog. I looked around my apartment, my home, and for the first time, it felt completely mine. No one waiting to take it, no one clawing at the door. No more guilt slipped under it, just silence. And in that silence, I remembered what it sounded like to breathe freely. There's a kind of silence that feels like a scream, and then there's the kind that feels like a blanket. I sat on my couch that evening, no TV, no music, just the soft hum of the fridge and the city far below. I thought I'd feel lonely, but what I felt was mine. Every inch of that room had a story, one that I wrote. No one telling me I should share. No voices saying I was selfish. Just breath. Steady. Deep. I sipped my tea slowly, let it warm my chest. I looked around. My place. My rules. My life. And in that moment, I didn't feel broken. I felt undisturbed. And that, after a lifetime of chaos, felt like a kind of heaven. People say family is everything, but what they don't say is that not every family is safe. I used to think being a good daughter meant saying yes, staying quiet, taking hits for the team. But now I know family isn't who shares your blood. It's who respects your boundaries. It's who doesn't see your success as their entitlement, who doesn't twist togetherness into guilt. I lost my parents, my brother, but I gained peace. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I owed anybody an apology. Maybe you're watching this in your own quiet room. Maybe you're wondering if you're selfish for needing space. You're not. Protecting your peace isn't cruel. It's survival. And if they only loved you when you were silent, then your silence wasn't peace. It was control. You deserve better than that. Not everyone who calls you family deserves a seat at your table. Some people will use "but we're family" as a weapon to guilt you, to drain you, to control you. But real family doesn't take, they protect. Real family doesn't demand, they respect. Real family doesn't use you, they love you, even when you say no. Don't be afraid to set boundaries, even with blood. Because if you don't protect your peace, no one else will. If Naomi's story and a 2-bedroom apartment made something inside you stir, hit that subscribe button. Here, we don't just tell stories that make you cry, we tell stories that make you think about what you've accepted, about what you've survived, and maybe it's time you chose peace over obligation.